Chapter 1 History Repeats. Okay kids, Dad and I are leaving, Miranda Owens announced as she rolled the last suitcase to the door. Byron, you take good care of Vanessa. Don't forget the check for her yearbook. I won't forget, Mom. You and Dad have a great time and don't worry about anything. I got this. Byron flashed a good boy smile to his mother. Miranda grabbed her son's face and kissed his cheek. I know you do. She pinched his cheek. Vanessa. Vanessa came bounding down the stairs. Her hair was brown shoulder length with highlighted beach waves. Her eyes were blue with shades of green. Miranda always said they reminded her of when fresh water meets ocean water. Her skin fair, cheeks flushed. She was only 15 years old. Byron was in his first year of college at Virginia University and came home for winter break. Miranda grabbed Vanessa and squeezed her. Okay, Mom, you're crushing me. Sorry, it's just that I'm going to miss you so much. I'll miss you too. A car horn beeped from the driveway and out stepped Daniel Owens. Much like a retired superhero, Daniel was a dashing older man. Byron took after his height of 6 feet 2 inches, luscious dark brown hair, ice blue eyes, and a smile that could drop the panties off any woman. Aside from good looks, Daniel was a well-to-do lawyer, one of the top 5 most requested in Alexandria, Virginia. He was taking his wife Miranda of 25 years on a cruise for a winter getaway. He walked up to the house and greeted Miranda. The family hugged one another and Vanessa and Byron watched their parents drive down the street. 2 days before Christmas, they learned they would be burying their parents. Byron had to drop out of college to take care of Vanessa or she would go into the foster system. Vanessa had gotten used to being alone. Byron worked 2 jobs. During the day he worked at the local bank as a teller, and after picking up Vanessa from school, he worked as a busboy at the local diner. It was a long 3 years of frozen dinners, late-night television, and just being alone. Vanessa relied on Byron a lot, and as she got older, she wondered if it had become too much. After she graduated high school and got accepted into James Madison University, she encouraged Byron to get back into school. Vanessa wasn't close with anyone in high school, and she especially grew distant after losing her parents. However, Riley Summers was the extrovert who took the introvert under her wing when they met as roommates in the college dorms. Her and Riley had grown close, and Vanessa had found a real friend who became her rock. The smell of burgers and fries wafted as Vanessa stepped out of Ballantine Burgers after a long weekend shift. The sharp winter air stung her cheeks as she walked through the parking lot to her old Nissan Altima. Her phone buzzed in her purse and she pulled it out to see Byron calling. She opened the car, started it, then grabbed her phone and hit the answer button. Hey, what's up, little V? Byron asked. I just got out of work. What are you up to? Just finished studying for an exam I'll have before winter break. Haha. I took mine yesterday, she taunted. Way to rub it in. Byron chuckled. What can I say? A midweek exam is the way to go. I bet I had longer to study than you did. You probably bombed yours. If I did, remember who helped me with homework. Fair enough. Byron laughed. Then his tone went from teasing to normal. Anyway, little V, I called you to let you know that I'm going with some friends to New York City for winter break. Vanessa frowned a little. It was the 4th anniversary of their parents' death. She needed to see him and wanted to introduce him to Riley. Yeah? What's sending you guys to the Big Apple? Byron sensed that Vanessa was disappointed and he knew why. It's the anniversary of our parents' death. I know, but I want to get away, V. Don't you think I've earned that? Vanessa closed her eyes, tears shot down her cheeks. It seemed selfish to ask Byron to be with her when he did deserve a getaway with friends. But she struggled that time of year ever since. Of course you do, By. I know, V, I know. It's hard for me too, but I need to get away. What about me? What if I want to get away? Byron shook his head, a few tears dripping from his eyes. You don't want to get away. You're not ready to. You don't get to say that. Vanessa's voice shook. It's fine, Byron. You deserve to get away. I'll just spend Christmas with Riley and her aunt. She hung up before Byron could say anything else. Why this trip to New York was so important she didn't know, but he did take care of her and even dropped out of college to do so. The least she could do was let him go. She could be the strong one for once, right? Winter break started and Vanessa sent a text to Byron. I'm sorry, you deserve to get away. For once, I can be the strong one for you. Byron replied with a gif of 2 people hugging and she smiled. 2 days before Christmas, she was with Riley at her aunt's house in Leesburg, Virginia. They were having a family Christmas party consisting of ugly sweaters and sugar cookies. Vanessa was enjoying a cup of hot cocoa by the fire when a call came in from Byron. She should have known he would remember to call that day of all days and it warmed her heart. Hey, How's New York? She asked as she answered the call. It's good. Listen, I just wanted to call and say I love you, little V. I've decided to stay in New York. You won't be seeing me again. Just know I'm okay and I love you. Wait, Byron, what's going on? Vanessa asked, but before she could finish the question, he'd hung up. She tried calling him back, but the only answer she got was a dreaded beeping noise and an automated voice. This number is currently out of service. She tried again and again and again. Same automated response. She texted him and automated text came back. Byron was gone. Chapter 2 Blurred Lines. 3 long years had gone by. After the first one, Vanessa eventually stopped trying to reach him and accepted him as dead. Riley's aunt passed away from breast cancer, and all they had in their little world was each other. Vanessa pushed people away, while Riley coped by sleeping with every frat boy that looked twice at her. While Riley was, to put it delicately, an open house, Vanessa put up walls. One night while Riley was out partying, Vanessa's phone rang. It was a blocked number, and usually Vanessa ignored those. It was most likely about an extended car warranty. But something inside the pit of her stomach urged her to answer the call. Her heart pounded as she debated with herself, but at the last ring she answered. Hello? She asked in a cold tone. Hey, little V. Her heart nearly levitated into her throat. She dropped her phone on the hardwood floor and stood by the counter, white as a ghost. Riley walked into the dorm, her hair saying it all. You okay? Byron's voice projected from the little speaker. Vanessa? Vanessa, are you there? Riley looked down at her phone, and though she never met Byron, she knew enough about him and what he had just put Vanessa through the past 3 years and picked up the phone. Who is this? She sneered. Riley was a redhead and her baby blue eyes projected nothing short of innocence. Her temper was just as sensitive as her freckled skin in the sun. Vanessa. This is Riley, her best friend and sole protector of my little introvert. If this is who I think it is, she is currently in shock, hence why she wouldn't be answering at the moment. Byron stood there, deserving every chastising word that came from the other end of the line. He was ready for something like this. On their parents' death anniversary, he called his little sister and let her know she'd never see her only family ever again. After all this time, he should be ripped apart. It also pleased him to know that Riley deemed herself sole protector of Vanessa. God knows she needed someone she could lean on. And it eased his conscience that Riley became that person. Hello, Riley. May I please speak to my sister? Riley looked at Vanessa, who heard what Byron was saying. She quietly nodded and Riley passed the phone to her. I'm here. Vanessa could barely get the words out. How you been? How am I supposed to believe it's really you? The line disconnected, but then a FaceTime call was coming in from the private number. With a shaky hand, Vanessa accepted the call. There he was. After all this time, after all the nights she cried herself to sleep, there was Byron staring at her through the other line. He looked every bit of a mess as she did. Tears began pouring out her eyes, and her and Byron sat there on FaceTime, silently gazing at each other, both crying silently. I can finally see you, little V. I want you to come to New York. Vanessa took a moment to process his invitation. What about you coming here? Byron shook his head. I can't. But you can come here, and I'm asking you to please consider spending your summer break here. The conversation was more difficult to get through than the one they had with the police, telling them their parents had gotten into a fatal accident. Byron was there to hold her while she cried and processed. That Byron wasn't there for her for this conversation. The Byron that told her he was never coming back and dropped off the face of the earth was all she had in that moment, and despite Riley's fierce support, she'd never felt more alone. Check your email. I've sent you and Riley tickets. Vanessa pulled up her email and sure enough, an email showed up containing itinerary. This was all so sudden. But what could she do or say? Byron had mysteriously showed back up just as he mysteriously left. You'll really be there? Byron looked her in the eye from the other line. I swear on our parents' graves I will be there to come get you. We can catch up and start over if you want. She wanted to say no, but the girl who cried herself to sleep every night for an entire year demanded she accept and go. And the next day they were packing up. You okay? Riley asked as she pulled some blouses from her closet. I don't know. I've spent so much time grieving over the years. Byron's disappearance was worse than my parents' death. And now he comes out of nowhere and wants me to come see him. Vanessa sighed as she rolled up a pair of magenta athletic pants. You don't have to go through with this, you know. Yes, I do. That girl who lost him, I owe this to her. Riley sat down next to Vanessa and rubbed her arm soothingly. You speak of that girl as if she's dead. She is dead. I buried her behind too many walls. At some point I stopped crying. If it wasn't for you, I think I would be dead too. I'll always be here for you. Hell, if it wasn't for you when my Aunt Jenny lost her battle to breast cancer, I probably would have ran away with some sugar daddy and drank myself to death. Both the girls laughed. You know his name would have been Ricardo, and he owns some mansion in Southern California. Vanessa mused. I'll have 16 kids due to multiple pregnancies. Riley groaned at the mere thought. Your cute little freckles will be compensating for all those stretch marks. They joked and laughed as they finished packing their bags. The flight was leaving late that night, and for a short flight, Vanessa wasn't sure why it had to be so late at night, but this was Byron and he reached out. Above everything, it was shocking to hear from him. What he did was cold and cruel, but when she remembered the sweet boy who dropped out of college to take care of her after their parents died so she wouldn't go into the foster system, worked 2 jobs every day to give her what she needed, that's the one that reached out. The one she told herself she was going to see. Vanessa and Riley stepped off the plane around midnight. Riley slept the entire hour on the flight, but Vanessa was extremely restless and anxious. Something about seeing Byron again felt odd, and it wasn't because of the 3-year span of not seeing or hearing from him. They went to baggage claim where Byron stood in a black leather jacket, an electric blue t-shirt and jeans. He was the Byron she remembered. The t-shirt and black leather jacket hottie that all the girls in Alexandria would have died for. Her brother hadn't changed a bit, and she was too focused on why this felt off. She couldn't even hear Riley expressing that her lady parts were fluttering at the sight of him. It wasn't until Byron wrapped his arms around her that it hit her. Byron had changed. What once was warm and comforting now felt cold and deadly. Chapter 3 Pure Blood. Malik 3 years ago. The lights of the party flashed multiple colors of electric purple, black and red. The music and the seductive atmosphere had every human heart pumping fresh, hot blood through their veins. Humans were so easily entertained. Malik Cromwell stood up on the balcony of his nightclub and looked around. The same thing that happened any other night when tourists entered his domain was happening then. Same thoughts everyone was thinking. A couple making out in the corner. The girl was having her first tongue-twisting minute. Malik chuckled to himself at her amateur thoughts. This hot guy kissing her, touching her, he could even sense the point where her panties grew damp. The boy was experienced and picked up on it as well, even though he didn't even need to touch there. Not yet. A few guys on the dance floor were trying to dance with beautiful women. The sweat dripped from their pores, creating an aroma of salted heat. Malik turned his attention to the bar where chicken wings and beer were being scarfed down. He knew the ecstasy of sex. He's had many women in his years. Virgins were his favorite. They got wet so easily. He could control how they felt during sex. He never let a lady feel pain, and once he worked past her barrier, he'd send her away and make her forget everything. But the taste of food, he'd never known in his life. Malik was a pure-blood vampire. He'd never known the struggle of human existence. He was born into the world of vampirism. Manipulation, power. Malik got everything he ever wanted with a simple snap of his fingers. Too easily did women get lost in his dark brown eyes. Men respected him just by looking at his tall, dark persona. Being a black vampire made him devastatingly handsome and intimidating. It also made him the vampire king of New York. His family built this city. He was around to see Lady Liberty herself placed in the Hudson. It was a city designed for vampires only, but Malik wanted humans there. He looked at them as a sense of entertainment. He believed humans and vampires could coexist. So long as they knew who was in charge. In charge he was. He made a deal with the Balthazar bloodline that he could coexist without incident. He was bound to a law that he could not kill more than 100 humans per year and couldn't kill his own kind. If one of his vampires killed a pureblood, they were sentenced to death. He could turn humans as long as he took responsibility for them, and he did. They became his family. Malik had lost his parents centuries ago, and was an only child. So he craved the loyalty and unconditional love of family. The only problem with turning a human, if he didn't let them feed from him, they would lose their humanity. Reduced to nothing but a rabid beast with an insatiable hunger for blood. They also had a sensitivity to the sun. A pure blood could be in the sun, but the nightlife was preferred. Malik chose his family carefully. The decision to turn someone never came lightly. That was until he noticed a tall, confident man walk into his club. A college stud with his group of frat brothers. He normally had Chad the bouncer throw out the type, but watching the one who went by Byron Owens caught his eye. Owens. Owens, where had he heard that name before? Why was it so familiar? Malik rubbed his chin in thought and gracefully made his way down the balcony toward Byron. Welcome to Lust. I am the owner and would like to introduce myself. He held out his hand. Malik Cromwell. Byron took a firm hold of Malik's hand and shook it. Byron Owens. Malik studied him a moment, the tragedy swimming through his mind, and the sister he left behind. The anniversary of his parents' death, feeling like he didn't do enough for his younger sister. Unable to be with her this time of year. Malik had seen how humans react to tragedy in more ways their little minds could comprehend. He almost saw himself in the boy, not just because they both lost their parents, but because he refused to be what happened to him. Humans love to victimize themselves. They were either the purest souls in the world or the most corrupt. More than a bloodthirsty monster could ever be. This Byron was no victim, not one to cry about the things that happened, nor the way he felt about himself. He simply set out to do what was best for him. Malik took Byron under his wing, led him away from his friends, built his trust to tell his story, and made a decision. He grabbed Byron by the neck and sank his teeth into him. Chapter 4 Truth Bomb. Vanessa. It wasn't that Byron was dark. Moore had a dark shadow lurking over him. Vanessa sensed he was indeed himself, but hugging him felt like hugging a corpse, and that was what disturbed her. She could see Riley eyeing him but being a good friend at the same time and keeping to the agreement that Byron was off limits. Of course, it didn't stop her from openly gawking. "It's really good to see you, little V," Byron said with tenderness in his voice that Vanessa hadn't heard since the night their parents died. She tried to respond with "It's good to see you too," but all that formed in her throat was a lump that pushed tears out her eyes. So many questions. So many words to have with him. And yet all that escaped her was those damn tears and a throaty gasp between them. She could feel how much it hurt him to see her this way. But he did abandon her when she needed him the most. She was the only one that got to be upset right now. "Byron, I know you have a lot of questions. I promise none of why I dropped off the face of the earth is what you think. You went to New York," she shouted. "You didn't have to go, but you did. You did because you couldn't be there. You couldn't even be there for me." The entire crowd of baggage claimers stared at them, and Riley, being the loudmouth, ready to defend her loved ones to the death, stepped up and hollered, "Mind your business, folks. Nothing to see here." It was Riley's voice that reeled Vanessa in and realized she had the attention of an entire crowd, easily one of her worst nightmares. "Let's just go, please." Her voice trembled. Byron walked with them out to the parking lot. The air was misty with fog, and it caused Byron to rush to the car as if it made him anxious. Vanessa reached out and ran her fingers through the fog. It seemed unnaturally thick, and it swirled through her fingers as if it wanted to hold on to her. What a strange feeling to have in around fog. It was normal to feel anxious when fog is out, the unsettling feeling of anything being in the presence of something, and having no idea what it is gave Vanessa mixed feelings. Fog just sits there, but she felt as if this strange mist was watching her in some way. It didn't cause any feelings of uneasiness, but it was odd that fog could watch someone. "Did it rain tonight?" she asked Byron as they loaded up the black '68 Camaro. "It might have while I was inside," he answered casually as he opened the door for the girls. Byron started the car and made his way through the parking garage. As they neared the exit, the fog had suddenly lifted, and when Vanessa looked out the window, her eyes met a tall, dark, and handsome man. His gaze rose a slight flutter in her chest. She turned to get a better look as they drove past, but he was gone. The rest of the ride was silent until Byron announced they were close to their destination. "I won't sugarcoat it, V. I have something to tell you, and Riley, with all due respect, I will need to talk to my sister alone. You're welcome to anything and everything in my place. She knows you and I need to talk." Vanessa grumbled. "I do, and it's okay. Thank you, Byron. You two take as long as you need. This is New York, I can entertain myself," Riley mused. Byron pulled into an underground parking lot and escorted the girls and their luggage into a building. The sound above indicated they were underneath some sort of nightclub. For a moment she worried about the damn noise, but once they walked through an automatic door to a corridor it stopped. "Thank God. You live under a nightclub?" Riley asked with an attempt to hide some enthusiasm. "A bunch of us do." Byron flashed a charming smile. "A bunch of you?" Vanessa asked. "The owner of the club rents condos down here. He made sure the ceilings were soundproof because the party goes on all night." "Sounds exciting." Riley's eyes lit up like the lady tent in her leggings. "It sounds noisy and obnoxious." Vanessa scowled. "Well, little V, I hope you won't hate it too much when I take you and Riley for a party up there tomorrow night." "A party?" Vanessa felt the sense of dread fill her already. Being an introvert meant she was easily drained if too many people were around. Some days just being around Riley was draining, and she required a couple hours to recover. "Don't worry, it's going to be a classy setting. You'll have to wear a nice dress to attend." Sounds like a shopping trip is in order in the morning, V. Riley clapped her hands. Byron chuckled and pulled out his keys to unlock his condo. He turned on the lights to reveal a bachelor pad setting, with a black tufted couch and 2 recliners, a small kitchen off to the right, and a 72-foot television screen. The hardwood flooring was a beautiful gray oak with a black rug and gray oak coffee table. He showed Riley to his guest rooms and Vanessa let her pick one. Byron led Vanessa to the kitchen, which looked rarely used. There wasn't even any signs of takeout. And what do you do for a living to afford a place like this? Vanessa asked. Byron looked her in the eyes. I'm just going to come out and say it. He blew out a breath. Vanessa, the reason I didn't come back wasn't because I just decided to. I was turned into a vampire. Chapter 5: The Invitation. Vanessa. Vanessa's jaw dropped and once again, her heart levitated into her throat. Did she even hear him correctly? What the hell did that mean? You what? I know it's a lot to take in right now, and you have a million reasons not to believe me. I mean, you could say I just lost my mind and I'm trying to conjure some wicked excuse as to why I just cut myself out of your life. But honest to God, I am telling you the truth. Byron rambled. Vanessa held up her hand to silence him. Just shut up for a second, please. I feel like I'm suddenly in some horror version of the Princess Diaries. Only I'm not a princess, you're a vampire. Byron stayed silent and allowed her to process what she needed. This wasn't something you hear every day. This was something you hear on a bad reality show or something you read in a book. She never imagined after all they'd been through that he would one day look her in the eye and claim to have been turned into a vampire. It was the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard. The worst part about this moment was nothing could have prepared her for it. Out of all the scenarios that played through her mind as the reason for his absence, she could honestly say this was the last thing she expected to hear. The shock was apparently more stressful than she realized as it declared war on her stomach. She rushed into the bathroom and a fountain of everything she had to eat earlier that day sprung from her mouth and thankfully made it into the toilet. Shock hasn't done this to her since their parents died, and somehow it all felt like a sense of irony. The vampire legend was as old as time itself and they were known as the undead. The questions whirled out of control through her mind as she grabbed some toilet paper and wiped her nose and mouth. Byron stood in the doorway with a warm washcloth. He still wasn't sure if he should speak or not. He opted to wait for her to be the one to say something. How? Was the first one as Vanessa grabbed the cloth and wiped her face. How did something like that happen? Byron extended his hand and helped her to her feet. I'll tell you everything. Just come sit with me. He pleaded quietly. Vanessa agreed to sit on the couch with him, a glass of ginger ale and some soda crackers in her hand. How the hell did that come to your brain? It didn't come into my brain. It just happened. Vanessa looked into his eyes. Just tell me everything. I'll process as you go and double check I'm not having some nightmare. It started when the guys and I decided to enter this nightclub called Lust. It seemed upbeat and exciting and everything I needed to get out of my own head. I already felt guilty for leaving you, but V, I really needed to get away. I know you did. I understood, I still do. Byron's lips curled into a little smile and he nodded. That means a lot, but I still know where I should have been. For you. That aside, I met the owner. His name is Malik Cromwell. He seemed to take an interest in me and took me under his wing that night. He showed me around the club as if I were some VIP. Just as I started to get comfortable, we sat down to have a drink and the next thing I knew, I felt a sharp pain in my neck and I collapsed. I woke up feeling this need to drink blood. Cliché, right? He chuckled. Malik broke it to me as plainly as I broke it to you. He looked at me and said, I've made you into a vampire, Byron. I feel like you have something to offer me. I hope you live up to my expectations. Wow, that's no pressure at all. Vanessa shook her head. I wasn't sure what was ahead. All I knew was I had to call you while I still felt slightly myself, and let you know that I love you and say goodbye. Byron's voice shook at his last words, and he wiped a few spilled tears. I honestly didn't think I would see you again, and I did the only thing I could do about it. It was Vanessa's turn to wrap her arms around her brother, and assure him that they did get to see each other again. There she was in New York with him, and she had no plans of leaving any earlier than she had to. The news left much to process still, but Vanessa had her big brother back, and in that moment it was all that mattered. So this Malik, who is he? She asked as she released him. Byron's gaze met hers once more. He rules this city. He's a pure-blood vampire and a king. This party you want to take Riley and I to, will there be others there? Of course. In fact, you do have to come because Malik is throwing it for you. For me. Call it a welcome to my city party. Malik really wants to meet you, that is if he hasn't already. Vanessa furrowed her brows. What the hell does that mean? That mysterious fog in the parking lot at the airport, that. Chapter 6. First Impressions. Malik. Malik enjoyed entertaining special guests in his city, so when Byron approached him and asked permission to reach out to sister and invite her to come see him, he obliged. Normally, goodbye was goodbye for anyone he turned into a vampire. For all their families knew, they were dead and it's how he preferred it. But this girl that Malik had seen in Byron's mind from time to time intrigued him. He didn't see the girl as she was now, all grown up with her walls up. That's not the girl Byron thought of. Byron always remembered his little sister as that sweet, rosy-cheeked teenager with more hair than meat on her bones. The girl that clung to him, looked up to him after their parents' tragic passing. You could say Malik had a desire to check on her himself. Out of respect for his most loyal knight, they would see how she was. What the time span after Byron ghosting her has done to her. Or maybe he just wanted to meet her. Malik had shape-shifting powers of transforming himself into a mist of fog. When Byron was due to pick up his sister, Malik wanted a first glance without revealing himself. He figured Byron would know it was him but couldn't say anything in that moment. This Vanessa, or as Byron called her little V, was not that scrawny, rosy-cheeked teenager. The Vanessa he had the pleasure of sneaking a glimpse of was all woman and indeed damaged. The walls around her could have kept even his slippery mist out if she wanted. When her delicate hands explored the fog with curiosity and wonder, he felt a strange sensation as if she could pull him in and never let go. He shape-shifted back to his human appearance and leaned against a car near the exit. Their eyes met as Byron's car drove past. It was though time slowed down. The slight glance was enough for the night, and he went home to prepare for the party he was holding the next night. Malik stood on the balcony as the lights of the club beamed to a ballroom setting. The furniture was replaced by one long dining table for the guests to sit and dine at. The DJ station was replaced with a live band in tuxedos playing classical music. The dance floor obviously converted ballroom dancing style. His club looked classy and ready to welcome special guests into his city. It was the most beautiful thing he'd seen that night until she walked in. Byron had Vanessa on one arm, and what he saw to be Riley Summers, the best friend, on the other. He glanced long enough to acknowledge them walk in, but his eyes remained on Vanessa. In a sparkling island blue off-shoulder evening gown. From the distance, he could see how the dress made her eyes pop. They were even more beautiful in person than what glimpses he saw in Byron's mind. She looked up at him and it nearly took his breath away. Once again overcome by the sensation that she could consume him just by a mere glance. He had to watch himself around her, that was for damn sure. A tiny smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth when he heard her heart's response to looking at him. She knew what he was, but the best friend did not. He wanted to show off by gracefully jumping off the balcony to introduce himself to her, but opted to walk down the stairs. Byron, this must be your sister and her friend, he asked. Byron forced a smile. Truthfully, he despised Malik. In a single blink, he turned his world upside down and he was forced to say goodbye to his sister in the shittiest way possible. If there's one thing he got to know very well in the measly 3 years of knowing him, it was that everything was about Malik. What they can all do for him. He was the hero and he let everyone know that. He didn't have the ability to read minds like Malik did, but he didn't need to know that Malik knew how he felt. As long as Byron stayed loyal, it didn't matter. Malik, good to see you this evening. I'd like you to meet Vanessa and Riley. Malik took Riley's hand first and placed a gentle kiss on the back of it. He flashed his charming smile at her. It's nice to meet you, Riley. He then took Vanessa by the hand and looked into those gorgeous blue/green eyes. Those eyes were, dare he say, penetratingly beautiful. They made him want to offer his soul just by gazing into them. He took her hand and dipped his head to kiss the back of it. She was so warm, and the strong heartbeat that he focused in on thundered through his ears like a melody. Beautiful. It's a pleasure to meet you, Malik, Vanessa said. Was it just Malik or did her voice sound smooth? Seductive? Did she do that on purpose? Why couldn't he tell the difference? After a cordial introduction, he pulled Byron aside. You're going to have to feed on them, Malik whispered. Byron arched a brow. No, wait, let me rephrase that.
El no.
They are off limits. It would be just a tiny feeding, a way to keep the others off them. If your men can't control themselves around my sister and her friend, who knows nothing about us by the way, then they have no business being here. Malik's lips curved into a bit of a sinister smile. They will try, but I can't guarantee any. Chapter 7. A New World. Handsome seemed too subtle of a word to describe Malik. Everything about him was completely charming and his looks to boot had Vanessa more intrigued than she wanted to be. Before seeing his face, she thought of Malik as the monster that took her brother away from her. Now that she saw his face and felt his lips on her hand, she definitely wanted to get to know him more. She turned to Riley as Malik pulled Byron aside. Okay, maybe this party won't be so bad. Riley let out a soft feminine chuckle. You mean he won't be so bad? Vanessa lightly tapped her best friend's shoulder. Fine, he's cute. Goo. Riley scoffed. A devastatingly good-looking man approaches you, introduces himself, throws an all-class party for us, and the word you come up with is cute? I'm not sure what word to use. It's okay V, neither do I. Oof, incoming. As though summoned, Malik approached the pair with that damn panty-dropping smile on his face. Miss Owens, Miss Summers, I do hope the accommodations are to your liking? Vanessa was taken aback. Who spoke like that in this day and age? Most guys she knew would be like, ladies having a good time? But here was Malik, speaking as elegantly as he carried himself. Yes, this is very lovely. Thank you. I was hoping for an excuse to buy a nice dress. This was perfect. Although I really hope to be a guest at Lust. Riley mused. I'll have your name on the VIP list and you won't have to wait in line. Malik winked. What about you, Vanessa? Are nightclubs to your liking? Riley went to say no, but Vanessa stopped her. Are you kidding? I live in nightclubs. I look forward to putting on a party dress and seeing what Lust has to offer. My standards are pretty high, so I hope it measures up. She stated with a wink of her own. Malik looked pleased to hear her response, but his eyes told her that he didn't believe a word she just said. Thankfully he didn't push it. If my club isn't to your liking, I'm sure we can find something in my city that measures up to your standards. He then looked Vanessa in the eye. They'll be serving dinner in a few minutes. May I be your first dance of the evening after Miss Owens? Vanessa was thanking God for blush and concealer that covered up how red her face was. First she just lied her ass off about her true feelings on the club scene. And now Malik wanted her first dance. I would love to. She smiled. The food was as delicious as it looked. The salmon Wellington was tender and crisp to perfection. The medley of fruits and vegetables looked like an edible arrangement. What struck Vanessa as odd was that her and Riley were the only humans at the table. The staff was human, but her and Riley were dining. The vampires also dined. Didn't they drink blood? She thought they didn't eat. Malik approached her after the meal and escorted her to the dance floor. Shit. She just realized she knew nothing about ballroom dancing. She froze as Malik placed his large hand on the small of her back and took her other hand into his. He seemed to get that she was new as well. He didn't ask questions, he didn't tease her. He simply gazed into her eyes and said, It's okay. I'll lead, you follow. The music that played was classical and Malik danced as though he just waltzed out of a Jane Austen novel. Vanessa fell into step with him, and they smiled at one another. Byron tells me you're a pure blood. What does that mean? She asked as he spun her out and pulled her back in. It means I was born a vampire. He answered matter-of-factly. Really? I didn't know vampires could reproduce. Only the pure bloods can. I lost my parents a long time ago and I was an only child. What happened to them? Malik focused on her. They were killed by hunters. I was taken in by the Balthazar bloodline. They offered me their daughter, but I wanted to build this city instead. I wanted to coexist with humans. There are some ground rules I have to follow in order to rule this city. I abide by them, they let me have it. I'm sorry to hear that your parents were killed by hunters. Malik flashed a side smirk. It was a long time ago, love. So was my parents' death and I still grieve. But you're just a human. Of course it still hurts. Vanessa pulled back. Just a human? Her blood began to boil under her flesh. What the hell was that supposed to mean? What else would you call yourself? Well, if I'm just a human, then my weak self is exhausted and ready to go to bed. Good night, Mr. Cromwell. Vanessa pulled from his grip and stormed off the dance floor. She sensed arrogance in Malik, and it was one of the things that made him so damn sexy. But hearing him say just a human made it sound so objectifying. As though she were no more than a glammed-up pile of flesh. This world was still all too new for her and there was so much to process. She didn't go to Byron's. Instead, she went out into the streets for some fresh air. All her ideas of New York City had felt tainted. How many people knew this city was under the thumb of some ancient vampire, or however the hell old he was? Did he pride himself on ruling a city so popular that most stories revolved around it? Anytime something goes south, it always started in New York. The irony. Vanessa aimlessly wandered the streets trying to take in some kind of normalcy. Within minutes a mist of fog had begun to surround her. She rolled her eyes and went to duck into an alley. The fog dissipated and she turned, ready to confront Malik. but the figure that stood before her was not him. She didn't recognize the man as someone she'd seen at dinner, and she would know if she saw him there. Vanessa was extremely observant of people around her. Their faces, their names. She internalized it all. "Hello?" she called out. The man said nothing, he just stared at her. His clothes were ragged, and when Vanessa spoke again, drool began to pour from his mouth, and he started to laugh maniacally. He then sprinted toward her at an unnatural speed. A large hand covered her eyes and she blacked out. Chapter 8. Rapid Consequences. Vanessa woke up on the couch in Byron's condo. A very worried Riley had sighed with relief when she woke up. "Byron, she's awake," she hollered. Byron whooshed into the living room and Vanessa looked up. "Byron, no, Riley. I know everything." Riley intervened. "It wasn't exactly a secret after Byron brought you here, and his hands were covered in blood." "How long was I out?" Vanessa asked. "Just a day," Byron answered as he brought her a glass of water. "Drink this, it'll help wake you up." Vanessa knew her throat was a little dry, but after sitting up and taking the ice-cold glass of water, she found herself guzzling it as though she hadn't had water in a year. "Slow down, you'll throw it up." Byron chuckled. "It's just so good." Vanessa mused as she licked her lips. She rubbed her head. "What the hell happened anyway?" "A vampire attacked you. One that no longer has a connection to humanity." Vanessa furrowed her brows. "No connection to humanity? What does that mean?" "The vampire that attacked you was once human. Over time, if they haven't drank from a pure blood, they lose their connection to what they once were. Reduced to that of a rabid animal." Byron's eyes grew distant. "It almost happened to me." Vanessa's eyes widened. "Say what? How would that have happened to you?" "I was once human. Malik bit me. If he hadn't allowed me to feed from him, I would have suffered the same fate." "Is this something you only have to do once?" Byron shook his head. "If we don't do it once a month, we will deteriorate." "Does Malik allow that to happen?" Riley asked. Vanessa turned to look at her friend. "I'm sorry, Riley, I know you're here, I'm just processing." "I get it. I am too. When Byron told me he was a vampire and that we were in a club full of vampires, I would have laughed in his face if there wasn't blood on his hands and his fangs were elongated." Riley chuckled. Vanessa turned to Byron. "You have fangs? Like that's a real thing?" Byron rolled his eyes. "I'm a vampire, fangs are part of the package." Vanessa's eyes lit up as though she was a nerd at some comic book convention. "Can I see?" Byron reluctantly closed his eyes, then opened them. The ice blue shade in his eyes turned to a sapphire blue and his fangs did elongate. Vanessa eagerly reached out and touched one, but pulled back when it sliced through her finger like butter. "Ouch!" she cried out. Byron's face returned to normal and he grumbled. "Idiot, what did you think it was going to do? These were made to cut through flesh." Riley handed Vanessa a tissue to stop the bleeding. "You know she can't resist bright and shiny things," she teased. Vanessa stuck her tongue out at Riley, and then turned her focus back to Byron, who looked troubled. "You okay? Is it my blood?" Byron shook his head. "I have no desire to drink from you, little V. It holds no temptation for me." "Then what's the matter?" Back to Riley's question from before, Malik doesn't allow it. But when he turns someone, he thinks he's doing them a favor, giving them a better life. But some can't cope with the disease of being undead. They would rather check out than remember what they once were. They run away, and as their humanity slips, so does everything that made them them, including their scent, which makes them difficult to track. The one that night, he came to me in a form of fog too. "Do you all do that?" Vanessa asked. Byron nodded. "We can if we want. The vampires that lose themselves do it as a way of going with instinct. Predator sneaking up on the prey and devouring at the right moment." "Did you kill that vampire?" "I did." "Did he hurt me? Why was I out so long?" "The presence of a rabid vampire is draining. They consume your energy so you can't scream or run. It's a way to paralyze you in a sense. When you lose energy like that, you passed out and your body has been recovering." Riley patted Vanessa on her back. "I was so worried about you, but Byron assured me that you were just drained and your slumber was charging you back up." "I'm sorry this happened to you, V." Vanessa knew all too well that sorry this happened to you wasn't just about the attack, but what happened to Byron and why he had to go away. Vanessa being an empath, Riley learned over time she didn't need to say much and Vanessa would know what she meant. Nothing about this was fair or natural. Vampires exist and Vanessa had to go with it to keep her brother in her life. She went to ask about Malik when there was a pounding on the door. Byron closed his eyes and frowned as though he were expecting a knock like that. "Who could that be?" Riley asked. Byron looked between the girls. It's Malik. He's here to serve my death sentence. Chapter 9 Acceptance. Malik. Vanessa was not the first woman to storm out on him. One is not simply as old as Malik and not have it happen on more than one occasion. She was, however, the first to make him feel some remorse for the comment that carelessly slipped from his lips. When a woman stormed out on Malik, it was all too easy to go after her, whisper sweet nothings into her ear, and use mind control for the rest. Malik had no interest in chasing her down to do that. If he were to go after her, it would be to beg for forgiveness. He was not about to display that kind of weakness. Not yet. The rest of the evening carried on without the guests of honor. Malik wouldn't stop such an extravagant evening just because she didn't want to be there. He entertained his people as any good host would do. As the night wrapped up, the scent of blood wafted through the walls. It was close inside the building. He whooshed to the roof of the building and stood at the top. His eyes scanned the scenery around him before they focused on a figure carrying a woman. He peered over the edge of the building, sharpening his vision to see Byron carrying an unconscious Vanessa. The sight of blood on that island blue dress, her arms and legs dangling nearly lifelessly. Malik panicked seeing her that way, and before he could think it through, he jumped off the building and landed on his feet in front of them. Byron looked understandably pissed, but what Malik read in his mind explained why there was also fear. Vanessa was okay. She wasn't even touched, just drained. The vampire that just tried to kill her was too far gone. However, they don't kill their own. It was Malik's number one rule. Punishable by death. Byron knew it and seemed to silently accept it. He had a day. A day to be with her. A day to help her recover. A day to tell her goodbye. It wasn't even for Byron. It was for her. Then Malik would come for him. He could show that much mercy. Come for Byron he did. Malik didn't even look at Vanessa as Byron opened the door, standing there, accepting what was to come. Let's go. Malik stated coldly. Byron turned to look at the girls. Riley was holding a confused and fussy Vanessa. Both girls were distraught and confused, but Riley seemed to know her place and knew that there wasn't a thing she could do except be there for Vanessa. It was good to meet you, Riley. Thank you for keeping her. Malik gave a curt nod to the girls, and a couple of his most trusted men, Aaron and Julius, grabbed Byron by the arms and took him away. Malik and Byron tuned out the sound of Vanessa's cries and pleas carrying from the room. Malik walked toward a double door and opened them where all the other vampires were waiting. It was set up like a courtroom. In the center was where they executed vampires. Byron had seen it before, and now he was the one in the center. Byron Owens, you have committed a crime punishable by death. Do you have any words in favor of your defense? Malik asked. He was going to kill my sister. I couldn't let him. I understand death didn't need to happen, and I accept my punishment. Very good. Aaron and Julius bound Byron's hands above his head with ropes soaked in vervain to the chain hook above him. Malik stood in front of him. He said nothing, but went to drive his fist into Byron's chest to rip his heart out. There she was. The blue eyes that met Malik's were no longer Byron's, but hers. Vanessa stood protectively in front of Byron. Her cheeks were flushed, sweat droplets emanated from her pores. Her breath harsh and ragged. She ran here. She ran faster than her legs have ever carried her, as though her own life depended on being here. Malik pulled his hand back, and once he stopped taking in her disheveled appearance, her cries came crashing into his eardrums like a spigot bursting. You can't kill him. He could see from the look in her face that her lungs were burning, and she was still recovering from her energy being sucked out of her. Malik arched his brow. I can and I have to. Vanessa shook her head vigorously. The poor girl's hair was sticking to her face from how much she was sweating. I won't let you take him. Malik and the other vampires let out a roar of laughter. Byron stood behind Vanessa, growling at her, but she ignored it. Her gaze never left Malik's. And what came out of her next silenced the room. Kill me in Chapter 10 Dealer's Choice. Vanessa. Knocking her best friend out with a heavy book, and leaving her to find Byron wasn't something Vanessa was particularly proud of. Riley would forgive her. Eventually. Though somehow Vanessa knew that Riley understood. She had just seen her brother for the first time since he ghosted her, found out he was a vampire, and now he was to be executed. She would be damned to lose him again. She ran through the large building, looking for where they might have taken Byron. Her body screamed at her in protest, but she ignored it. Call it instinct, but somehow she was able to track them down, and she forced her way through the heavy-ass doors. She shoved her way through the crowd and stood in front of Byron at last. She wanted to cry with relief. She made it in time. Of course the vampires laughed when she argued they couldn't take him. She was after all just a human, right? Well, she didn't give a shit. These vampires didn't bother her. After everything she'd been through, the opinions of mighty immortals were no more to her than she was to them. She would rather die than lose Byron again. She knew that. She felt that way ever since he reached out. She didn't expect to have to go through with it, but here she was, ready and willing. Vanessa, what are you doing here? Byron muttered behind her. He sounded weak, and she could smell his flesh burning. Taking your place, she whispered huskily. Her eyes bore into Malik's. He stared back at her and it made her heart race a little faster than it was already. This amused him, he showed it in his face, and there was zero effort in hiding it. You wish for me to kill you instead of him? She nodded. I do. Malik observed her a long moment. You really mean that, don't you? Does that surprise you? She asked as she folded her arms and popped her hip to the side. Malik chuckled and nodded. Actually it does. You fascinate me, Vanessa Owens. In all my years I've never met a human willing to die to save someone else. Vanessa, don't do this, please. Byron protested. Vanessa was the one to shut him up. I don't care what I have to do. You will take my life instead of his. After all, I'm just a human, right? I was supposed to die the other night. Take me. Malik arched his brows in surprise. I see you're still bitter about that comment. Vanessa took an unfazed step toward him. How about you live up to your words and end my life right here, right now, and let Byron go free? An annoyingly handsome grin spread across Malik's luscious lips. And what will you get out of this? Vanessa turned to look at Byron, then back to Malik. When our parents died, Byron dropped out of college to take care of me. For 3 long years he slaved away at 2 crappy jobs to take care of me and make sure I had everything I needed. He was my rock when I was unstable. He put me above himself. The other night, he put me above himself. She looked back at her brother, who had tears in his eyes, shaking his head. It's my turn to put him above myself. Leave Byron alone and just take me. Because after everything I've been through with him, if you kill him, it will ruin me. I need my brother. Malik stood silently, watching and listening intently. And what would Byron do without you? Little V. Byron grunted in pain. I regret nothing. I would do it all over again. You can't take my place. I won't let you. Tears began to flow out of Vanessa's eyes. I know you would, it's why you deserve to live for you. Her lip quivered and she used the sleeve of her hoodie to wipe her eyes and nose. Taking care of you was living for me. When you ghosted me, I thought I was going to die from devastation. When you reached out to me wanting to bring me here with you, I felt like I could live again. I'm doing this for you and you're going to let me. Malik held up a hand to silence them both. Vanessa, I'm not going to kill you. I've already reached my limit on human lives for the year. She closed the gap between them. Tears flowed endlessly down her cheeks. Well, that's too damn bad. Because I've reached my limit on loss. So one of us is going to have to give. Turn me first if you have to so you don't overdo your quota. But you will not kill Byron and leave me in this world without him. He can be without me. Malik lifted his hands to her face and cupped it, brushing her tears away with his fingers. His eyes tender and merciful. I won't turn you nor kill you. Truthfully, I want Byron to live too. I like him and don't want to lose him. I do believe there's an arrangement you and I can come to. Byron went to protest, but Vanessa held up a finger to shush him. Name it. Malik flashed a side smirk and trailed his finger along her jawline and lifted her chin so they were face to face. If I let Byron live, you surrender yourself to me. Your life lies in my hands and my hands alone. Vanessa didn't even blink. So be it. Chapter 11. New Home. Vanessa. Vanessa. No. Byron hollered as Aaron and Julius began to usher him away. Don't give yourself to him. I'll die. Let me die. You have a life to live. I don't, he called out. His cries went in vain. Vanessa made up her mind. Even as Malik looked at her as if he'd just won a rare prize, she didn't regret the deal she just made. Saved Byron. She knew he was alive and well so long as she cooperated with Malik. He held his hand out to her. Let's go, my dear. Vanessa scoffed and slapped her hand into his. I'm not your dear. Malik let out a soft growl and pulled her close. They were eye to eye, chest to chest, hand in hand. The position ignited a fire between their bodies, and they gave each other a look as though they felt it but made a silent agreement to ignore it. Oh yes, you are. His tone was smooth, almost sultry, and a touch commanding. This combination did things to Vanessa she didn't appreciate in that moment. She basically sold herself so her brother wouldn't die. Unlike his pleas, she was determined that her sacrifice didn't go in vain. She shoved herself away him and her flustered reaction clearly amused him, which pissed her off all the more. She followed Malik to a limo that appeared to be waiting for them outside. Just like a gentleman, Malik opened the door for her and allowed her to slide in first. They were the only two in the back and it made her nervous. The driver pushed a button which raised a barrier between them and himself. Oh God, what was going to happen to her? Where were they going? She looked to Malik who sat across from her. A perfect chance to lunge at her at any moment and the element of surprise could be against her. Her anxiety coursed through her body like a restless demon. Despite the uneasiness, deep down she felt he wouldn't do her any harm. Or was that wishful thinking? The ride was about 30 minutes long, most of that due to traffic. Malik said nothing. Did nothing. He seemed aware of her anxiety but offered no solace. Why would he? It appeared she now owed him everything and her nothing. The agony of the unknown was still better than being here knowing her brother was dead. She kept reminding herself of that. This was to save him. It was her turn to do something for him. The limo stopped. The door opened and the last bit of daylight shone through. With Byron's place having windows covered up, she didn't even know what time it was. It seemed from the moment she woke up until now the time didn't matter. She woke up and Byron was taken. Now she was here. Vanessa stepped out of the limo, beholding a gated mansion. The building looked almost like a castle but with modern accents. Welcome to your new home. Malik smiled as he escorted her along the path to the double doors. He opened one door and ushered her in. The place definitely reflected everything Malik thought of himself. The cream-colored marble floor with black and gold accents practically sparkled under their feet. A large black statue of a jaguar with black wings stood majestically in the middle of the double staircase. The house intimidated her. She looked at the brown leather furniture and sighed a bit. At least it would repel her but sweat. But if she farted, that would not muffle the sound at all. Then again, Malik would probably hear everything gurgling in her gut before it even thought of leaving her body. Malik took her by the hand and she didn't resist. Hell, she didn't even notice. This way, he said as he led her into an extravagant dining room with a chandelier and everything. We're going to go over this new arrangement. I've set some rules. Oh, great rules. Vanessa rolled her eyes and sat in the chair Malik pulled out for her. He sat across from her. What's mine is yours now. This is where you'll be residing. She nodded in agreement. Okay. You're welcome to anything and everything. If you require something, I'll get you anything. I'm not active during the day, so you can come and go as you please. I thought you said there's rules? Malik let out a chuckle. I'm not finished. Vanessa looked at him as if to tell him to proceed. You will be in this house by sundown every night. I'm not going to hold you prisoner, Miss Owens. At least not during the day. And don't even think about trying to run away or hide from me. Malik stood up and leaned over the table. Not only do I have eyes and ears all over this city, but I can see into your mind. But you knew that, he stated with a wink. Vanessa didn't flinch at his words nor have any response to his wink. Even if I could plot an escape, and I could, she said smugly, I wouldn't. I'm here on behalf of Byron's life. If I ran away or tried to hide, you would kill Byron. You don't need to see into my mind to know. I'll be damned if I let that happen, no matter how much being here sucks. A wide grin spread across his face and he leaned in closer. The days are yours. He placed his fingers under her chin and lifted her face to gaze into his eyes. But at night you, Vanessa Owens, are mine. Chapter 12. Sweet Taste. Malik. Malik had to give it to her. She was not afraid of him, and that truthfully excited him. She never made a direct threat that she would make him eat the words he uttered the night she stormed out on him. Oh, how she came through all the same. Between stepping up to save her brother and showing no fear toward him. She wasn't just a human. He knew that now. He could honestly say out of the 500 years he'd been around, he never met anyone like her. What made her different? He had no idea. FCK, she just was. He pulled back after her response of, so be it, and she picked out the furthest guest room from his own bedroom. That was no surprise, but all the more still amusing. He arranged for her belongings to be brought to her, and because he was so damn generous, he allowed Riley to come make sure she was all right. He wouldn't allow Byron there. No one was allowed there. Even Riley came blindfolded. He stood at the other end of the hall, listening in on their conversation. You knocked me out, you brat. Riley chastised. I had to. They were going to kill Byron. Vanessa sighed. I know, I'll let it slide this once, Vanessa Owens. Thank you, Riley Summers. Both girls giggled. How's your head? Vanessa asked. You didn't do much damage. I've had worse headaches than this after drinking. Riley teased. Well, I wasn't going to bludgeon you to death. I'm just saying I'm fine. Good, I'm glad you're all right. Thank God you're all right. I honestly wasn't sure what to expect. But I'm here in one piece. Vanessa chuckled, then her tone turned serious. How's Byron? He's waiting to hear that you're all right. I told him he should rest. Apparently this vervain herb makes their skin burn. He's healing fine, but I insisted he rest and wait for me. Please tell him I'm more than okay. In fact, Malik's been pretty generous given the circumstances. He's given me freedom during the day, but he said, and I quote, "At night, you Vanessa Owens are mine." Vanessa deepened her voice to sound like a proper gentleman. Wow, he's given you free reign of the day? Well then you and I can spend the days together. Planned on it. But what will we do once the summer's over? Will he let you go back with me to go to school? I don't know. I gave him my life to spare Byron's. I'm thinking that's a pretty permanent gig. I guess it is. Both girls were sad and unsure of the future. What will you do at the end of the summer? Vanessa asked. I don't know, things have sort of not gone as planned. I don't want to commit to staying here. But then it doesn't make sense for me to go back to the university without you. Maybe we can just get through the summer for now? I'd love that. I'm just glad I'll still get to see you. Me too. Will he ever let you see Byron? I hope. Otherwise it's sort of all for nothing. As Malik listened to them talk, he could feel the sadness that wasn't verbally expressed. The gravity of her choice weighing down on her. She was in the middle of school. Her life was really just beginning, and she ended it too willingly. He shook his head. This was her choice and now she would live with it. She agreed to give all that up. And damned if anyone tried to convince her otherwise. Several days had passed. He gave her time to adjust to the manor, get settled in permanently. Nightfall was approaching and just like clockwork, Vanessa entered the manor as it grew dark. Malik waited for her to walk upstairs before whooshing up to her. That smell on her. Coffee. Alcohol. Her perfume. Cologne. What? She snapped. He'd startled her. Her cheeks turned red, and a little sweat began to form on her forehead. I smell cologne on you, he growled. Yeah, so? It's New York. Men wear cologne and some of them wish to tear gas the streets with it. He looked into her mind. No one had been close, but some tourists did overdo it and she passed by them. Not to mention Riley dragged her to happy hour. Vanessa was a little intoxicated. Her fruity cocktails traveling through her bloodstream made him thirsty. I hope you know the past several days have been orientation. Now it's time I show you what it means to be mine. Malik backed her into a wall. Those blue eyes, though glazed, looked back at him, emanating no fear but curiosity. He chuckled as he saw where her thoughts were going, what she assumed was going to happen. He'd be damned if he wasn't thinking the same thing, because her pheromones were tempting him to go there. The look in her eyes was what stopped him. For a moment he felt transparent, as if she could see into his mind as well. It scared the shit out of him. He slid a hand up into her hair and leaned her head to the side. He took a moment to smell her. His lips trailed lightly along her skin. Her warm vein pulsated beneath them, and as he slowly moved, it fluttered faster and faster. He was in control and he loved it. That was until he felt her hands on his shoulders, gripping his black t-shirt. A soft moan of longing projected from her lips, and he was hard against her. FCK. To regain control, he bore his fangs and sank them into the throbbing vein. As a pure blood, Malik could make his victims feel anything he wanted them to while he fed on them. For her, he sent a sense of euphoria and pleasure into her as he drank her sweet red nectar. She moaned again and clung to him. Her heart rate increased, and the blood flowed smoothly into his mouth. He listened to her pulse, and as it began to slow, he pulled away. He slowly, firmly, trailed his tongue along the puncture wounds, healing her and cleaning her. Having regained control, he turned and walked away, leaving her breathless, aroused, confused, and frustrated. Chapter 13. Sober Realization. Vanessa stood there, hot, bothered, and now sober. She wasn't much of a drinker, but Riley introduced her to fruity cocktails and that ruled them tolerable. She held a hand to her neck, panting as the moment played on repeat through her mind. It was strange. She'd never been bitten by a vampire. Hell, just a couple weeks ago she didn't even know they existed. She imagined being bitten would be painful. Yet when Malik sank his fangs into her neck, she felt nothing but pleasure and desire. Felt so good in the moment. Her body riling up, the damp heat between her thighs. For a moment nothing else existed. Not the deal they made, the fact he was willing to kill her brother. None of that. It was nothing but Malik's mouth on her neck, drinking from her. And if she were dying, that would have been the ideal way to go. Though now she did remember it all. Watching him walk away, her body cooling down, her senses coming back to her. She remembered where she was now. Why she was there. Pleasure and desire quickly turned to anger and disgust. She squealed out in anger and went to her quarters to take a shower and go to bed, because she didn't anticipate seeing him any more that evening. The next day she was at brunch with Riley, who was shoveling carbs, protein, and grease into her mouth as if they were to be her last meal to cure her hangover. "Oh my God, this is the best eggs Benedict I've ever had in my life," she exclaimed as she shoved a bite in her mouth. "Slow down, Ree, you wouldn't want to get sick." Vanessa chuckled as she poked a cube of watermelon with her fork and popped it between her teeth. "Already happened. Byron was kind enough to hold my hair back. Now I'm just starving. Is it weird? Being there with him without me?" Riley shook her head. "It was awkward at first, and I was going to opt for a hotel, but Byron asked me to stay. We've sort of been getting each other through things. I miss him," Vanessa said as tears poured down her cheeks. "Everything that's happened since we got here. It's all just..." She shook her head, unable to finish her thought. "Sudden? Shitty? Depressing?" Riley added as she reached over and rubbed Vanessa's shoulder. Vanessa nodded and rested her head on her shoulder and allowed her tears to flow. "Tell me again why he won't let you see Byron?" "I don't know. It's not something he's really discussed with me. I don't even feel like I can see him without Malik's permission. I won't go against him because I will not lose Byron like that." "Have I mentioned how brave you are?" Vanessa smiled. "No, but it's nice to hear. I don't feel brave. I'm not okay at all. And that's okay. Just because you sold yourself to some vampire king doesn't mean you have to like it. Sometimes I feel like he wants me to like it, and he makes me like it." "Did he take your V card?" Vanessa laughed and sat up, wiping her tears. "No, and could you have said that any louder? Hey, no shame in waiting for the right one game. I envy your purity. I'm far from pure." "Okay, that's true, you're a bit of a closet perv," Riley teased. "So what makes you think he makes you like your situation?" Vanessa rolled her eyes and shook her head. "So last night I come in from drinks with you. Malik is at my side in like a second and he's naming everything he smells on me. He could smell cologne and he got really pissed." Riley arched her brow. "So he's a little possessive. Kind of hot, but not really, given he's the dude that was going to execute Byron." Vanessa sat with a guilty look on her face and avoided eye contact with Riley, who snapped her fingers and pointed at her. "So you think it is hot?" Vanessa turned bright red. "No, I don't think it's hot. I know you, V, and you, whether you like it or not, are attracted to Malik." Vanessa shook her head. "If I was, he ruined it last night when he bit me." Riley's eyes lit up, a wide smirk on her face. "Kinky." Vanessa waved her hand at her. "Not like that. He did it as some form of taking control of something." Riley's amused expression didn't falter. "I'm a man who takes control." Vanessa groaned and face-palmed her forehead. "I shouldn't feel this way, Ree. When he bit me, he made me feel horny." Vanessa shuddered. "That's one way to describe it. I've heard of that. I read vampires can send a sense of euphoria through their victims. It's in one of my dirty girl novels." "Well, it's a real thing." Riley furrowed her brows. "But wait, if he's a pure blood, and he bit you, doesn't that mean you'll turn?" Vanessa's eyes widened. Damn it. She hadn't thought about that at all. How could she? All color dropped from her face as she looked at Riley. "I might." Chapter 14. Alec and Alfred. Malik. Malik had his rules, the Balthazar bloodline, set for him. He didn't think anything as of late violated those rules, but alas, that night they came knocking on his doorstep. He opened the door and forced a smile on his face. "If it isn't my old friends Alec and Alfred Balthazar." "Evening, Malik Cromwell, we've much to discuss." "Is that so? Well, please come on in and we will have a little chat." "Vanessa!" Malik hollered. She'd made her way into the front sitting room by the time all of them took a seat. "May I offer you a drink, gentlemen?" He gestured toward her. Alec and Alfred looked at one another and nodded. "I beg your ancient pardon?" Vanessa scoffed. Malik shot her a stern look and trailed a finger across his neck in a slitting motion, and her demeanor changed. "Hold out your wrists, love." He smiled. Vanessa closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and held out her wrists. Malik had sensed when she came back earlier that she was wondering if she was in transition. He had intentions of assuring her until the damn Balthazar twins came knocking. Alec and Alfred took each of her wrists and bit into them. They drank vigorously until they felt her turn weak, nearly unable to stand. Then they backed off. "Why don't you go and rest, my dear?" Alex smiled after healing where he bit. Alfred did the same. Yes, go rest. You have the night off. We have important matters to discuss with Malik. Alfred cooed and sent her away. He looked over at Malik. She is as tasty as she is brave. He grinned. Speaking of her, we will be discussing this arrangement you seem to think you can make. I obeyed your laws and spared the lives of one of my men. No rules were broken. Malik argued. You're quite right, but this deal with keeping a human as your pet in exchange for her brother's life was not a deal of yours to make. Alex stated in a smooth, snobbish tone. I couldn't exactly kill her. I've met my quota for the year. This was the next best thing. It's not just the girl we're here about. Her best friend has now been exposed to our world because you couldn't keep track of the vampires you're creating, and one lost their humanity. You allowed him to run the streets of the city that the Balthazars built, but allowed you to rule. Alfred said. He ran away. Malik shrugged. Then why did you plan to execute Mr. Owens if he eliminated the problem?
Alfred inquired.
Because I have laws of my own that I must abide by. We don't kill our own. Regardless of the state of that vampire, he wasn't Byron's to kill. It's a crime punishable by death, and if I give one exception, all are going to expect it. And what exactly was your plan had he not been eliminated? Alec asked. I had some guys out looking for him. They would have brought him back, and we would have cured him. Malik explained. You do know once they reach that state of mind they're gone. There is no bringing them back. Death is the only way to take care of it. So why punish Byron Owens for saving his sister from the attack? Again, it's not so much about what should have been done with the vampire. I have to keep my men in line and show that when it comes to my rules, there are no exceptions. Alec and Alfred glanced at one another. We will excuse it just this once, but if the best friend talks, she dies. As for Miss Owens, go ahead and keep her. We look forward to partaking the next time you FCK up, and you will. When you do, we'll be taking the city away and having you killed. Good night, Malik Cromwell. Alex smirked. The brothers disappeared, leaving nothing but mist behind. Vanessa had made her way back downstairs. She was shaky and pale. Malik looked at her, and before she could even stumble on her next step, he whooshed in to stabilize her. Let's go to the kitchen and get you some juice. He led her to the kitchen. Who are those guys? She asked as he gave her a tall glass of orange juice and slid a granola bar to her. Alec and Alfred Balthazar. They're heads of the most powerful vampire coven in history. There was an agreement long ago after the city was built. I wanted to have it so I could coexist with humans. They set rules for me, now I think they're just making more up as they go. I've been bitten by 3 pure bloods, am I going to turn too? She asked, her voice a little more clear than before. Malik chuckled and shook his head. I am sorry. I meant to explain things until those pricks showed up. No, I didn't inject you with my venom. Neither did they. If they did, you'd have felt it by now. Vanessa blew out a huge sigh of relief. Thank God. She basked in her relief for a moment before looking at him again. I heard them threaten you. Don't worry about it. Oh, I'm going to worry. Vanessa took another sip of her juice. Because what happens to you now is going to affect me. God help him, she wasn't wrong in that statement. He rubbed a hand over his buzzed hair. Perhaps he didn't think this deal through as well as he thought. He looked into her eyes. No, don't worry. Because the only thing that's going to happen to you is me. Chapter 15. A stupid mistake. Vanessa. It was easier than she thought to convince Malik to see Byron. But he had to be present, and it had to be at lust. Small price to pay. She sat in front of the vanity in her room. She truly had a beautiful room. A queen-size bed to herself with the softest sheets she'd ever slept on and a cozy comforter. A vanity with a light-up mirror that she took full advantage of to up her makeup game. She proceeded with the finishing touches of her red smoky eye look and applied her favorite drugstore lip gloss. She got up to stand in front of the full-length mirror by her dresser and looked over her outfit. Her and Riley had gone shopping that day for a club-appropriate outfit. The silver chrome halter top made her feel naked, and that her boobs would come flying out in protest if they weren't held down by this boob tape Riley found on photogram. The black skinny jeans and stiletto ankle boots were out of her comfort zone as well. Vanessa didn't see the point in any of it. Sure, she looked hot, but it wasn't like she could go home with anyone that night. Not that she would if she could. Her virgin status wasn't going to falter because of a night at a sexy dance club. She wasn't sure what she was saving herself for anymore. The idea of sex was appealing, and it was an experience she wanted to have, but it was something one had to be ready for. Vanessa was not ready. She hated that since she moved in with Malik, that night he bit her. She never forgot the tingling sensation that went through her body. She could consciously push the fantasies away during the day, but at night, when her subconscious was in control, the dreams were f***ing hot. He didn't even show any kind of interest in her, other than holding up her damn deal with him. He might have been flirtatious at first, but these days he was just there, and so was she. Vanessa blew out a sigh of reluctance and made her way down to Malik. Her hair was curled that night and it flowed over her shoulders and down to her mid-back. Ready when you are. Malik turned to look at her, and the look on his face amused her. He could control his facial expressions. She learned that about him. But his eyes, as dark and mysterious as they were, they said it all. He cleared his throat and offered his arm to her. You dress this way every time you saw your brother, he teased lightly. Nah, usually I'm more naked, she replied. Malik chuckled softly and escorted her to the limo. He didn't look at her the entire ride, and if Vanessa was honest with herself, it frustrated the hell out of her. They walked into the club just as people outside were lining up. Girls whispered to one another about how hot the owner was. She caught Malik's smile, enjoying the compliments. Damn dude knew he was good looking. When Vanessa saw Byron, she pulled her arm from Malik's and ran up to him, throwing her arms around him. Hey little V. Byron chuckled as he squeezed her. I'm so glad to see you're okay. I have to be, otherwise the deal breaks. Vanessa smiled. Riley approached them with a couple margaritas in her hands. Drink up, V. We all get to hang out tonight. Vanessa took the drink and it looked amazing. Just the one, I don't want to get drunk. Boring. Riley teased. You look hot. I told you that boob tape worked wonders. She winked. Can we not talk about my sister's boobs right now? Byron laughed uncomfortably. No one said you had to look. Riley smirked. Vanessa watched Byron jerk forward as Riley walked away. Did she just slap his ass? She shook her head and took a long swig of the frozen drink. Oh damn, that's as good as it looks. Malik prides himself on serving the best. Byron responded. Pretty sure he just has to be the best. Vanessa giggled. So how are you and Riley doing? Byron went and sat on a couch and patted the surface next to him where Vanessa Saturday. She and I are helping each other really. This isn't a tragedy, bye. Vanessa assured. For what it's worth, he's been flexible. I get the day to myself. I can see Riley. Tonight I get to see you. You sold yourself, Vanessa. He might be flexible, but at the end of the day, I'm here because he owns you, and that doesn't set well with me. It's better than you being dead. This is pointless. Because I'd rather be dead than have him own you. The words felt like a low punch to the gut. Is that how you really feel? Her words were shaky as they came out. Byron nodded without so much as a blink of hesitation. I do feel that way. Giving up your life like that and being owned by him was a stupid thing to do. I would rather be dead than live every day worrying about what is happening to you. Vanessa looked down in shame. Was what she did a selfish thing in order to keep him alive? She blinked, a few fallen tears loose. Thank God for waterproof mascara. What's done is done and I'm fine. He refused to kill me. And he spared you. How is that so stupid? Because you have your whole life ahead you. You got accepted into a great university, you have a chance to fall in love and have kids. I lost my ability to live a long time ago. You gave up everything when I have nothing left. Vanessa sat there in silence, the tears flowing down her cheeks. She got to see him and it couldn't even be a nice visit. No. It was all about how stupid she was. Her sacrifice wasn't stupid to her. What about the 3 years she'd spent in agony wondering what the hell happened to him? What do you want me to do about? I want you to sit here while I give you your life back, Byron said as he stood up and began walking toward Malik. Vanessa gasped in horror as Byron delivered a right hook to Malik's face.